Hi, everyone. Welcome to My Imperfect Pursuit podcast. We are in episode 53, and the title of this episode is Are You Confusing Your Purpose with Your Value? Are you confusing your purpose with your value? Are you making one equate the other? Learning to truly see the way God made you. So, thank you for being here. I'm honored that you are tuning in, and I hope this episode blesses you. I hope it speaks into your heart, because that's exactly why I do this. So, this episode, it came to me, the topic of this episode came to me from my own experiences in life, some way far off in the distance, some not so far off in the distance, some I've been working with kind of in my present life, especially as I'm building my coaching business and now pursuing becoming a public speaker for Christian women. I mean, those things, when you are pursuing those things, it really brings to surface a lot of questions you may have. So, friends, you can know that where you stand with your purpose, with your calling, and in the same space, you can also question if it's enough. You can also question, like, this is not how I thought it would look. Both can be in the same space, but we often feel like it can't be one, it has to be one or the other, right? So, with that knowing that, I will also want you to understand we don't just have one big purpose in life. We serve multiple purposes every day, every single day. You may have heard me say it if you've been listening to this podcast. We serve multiple purposes every day. However, in that, we also have a purpose that will stand out amongst the others in our life, right? You know that you serve multiple purposes every day, or you're beginning to discover that, but there's one big one that you're starting to see take precedence over the others, and that you actually see it happen. That can happen too. So, for example, you can be an encourager to others around you, like to your inner circle, to your family, to your friends. You know that that's a spiritual gift and you see it play out in your life. And you can also see it play out at the grocery store, like to the person behind the checkout counter. They're having a rough day and they just kind of start talking to you about things. And before you know it, you're encouraging them to hang in there, whatever it might be. However, you can also use the gift of encouragement on a bigger scale. So you see it play out in multiple things, small things, if we have to label it small, even though those really aren't that small, but you also see it play out on a bigger scale. So I want to ask you the question, what happens when you begin to allow your purpose to equate your value? What if right now, those of you out there listening, you're in a season where your purpose isn't something that is showy or glamorous or big or grand? What if your purpose right now is just serving others in such a way that doesn't get a whole lot of recognition? You don't have huge recognition of it out in the world. So, for example, like if you're at your job and you help others at your job find clarity and peace with whatever type of job they do. Like you're the person that can help them out. You know, you have you have a great ability to organize and decipher information that helps others have a smoother day. You are a problem solver and you can solve those, even the biggest problems at work, right? And so let's say that's what's going on in your job right now. You're helping others, helping them get the information for things to run smoother. And you might not think it's that big of a deal. You might even at the end of the day just feel empty, be like, oh, I just feel like I have no purpose. I'm not serving a big purpose. Every day I show up and it's the same. I'm the problem solver. And so once again, and they're not, at what point does this become something bigger? Or I'm ready to move on to something bigger, and you feel like because you're not serving whatever you feel like, whatever you're defining as a big purpose. So therefore, it's not that big of a deal. Therefore, your value must be smaller than the person who stands in front of thousands of people and encourages them or leads them to God, or maybe the person who stands on a stage and reveals a new invention or a new company and it just takes off and it starts to change the world. So therefore, you feel like your value is smaller than that person. So when this happens, what we're doing is we are tearing away the value of what we do day to day. We're the ones tearing it apart. The value of what we do day to day in various seasons of our life when we fail to recognize our purpose or our purposes. Because we, like I said, we have more than just one purpose in life. It's not a Greek mythological story where there's one purpose and they go after it and there they are. God is bigger than that, and he wants to use us in so many ways. So when we fail to recognize our purpose, our purposes, that we feel like we're less than, that we feel like our purposes do not make, and I want you to understand, our purposes do not make us any more or any less important in the eyes of God. However our purposes play out, whether they be helping the people at work just have a better day, you can be the one they go to. You answer all the questions. You're the person at the grocery store that when you walk through, like I said, the checkout line, you just happen to strike up a conversation with someone and you encourage them. You do not have any less value than the person standing on a stage in front of thousands or millions of people changing lives. That's not how God sees it. The enemy, however, he wants us to see it that way. He wants us to see that we do not hold value, that we are less than if we aren't doing something big and getting recognition, because that is of the world. The recognition of man is of the world. Does it help us out? Does it encourage us to keep going? Is it nice to know that you're doing a good job and to get recognized? Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong to know that, hey, you know what? It feels good to be recognized. It does. But when you put your value in that, that is what the enemy wants. And it's kind of a slow, sneaky process. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because we don't realize we're often doing it. We can be like, yeah, I don't put my purpose or value in what the world says or all the recognition. But there are times we do slip into that. And before we know it, we're getting frustrated or angry or even jealous of seeing others get recognition because we want the same. And then we start to, that jealousy can turn in on us, and it turns us inside out, and we start feeling we are less than. Theodore Roosevelt said, and I've said it on here before on my podcast, Theodore Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. And that's true. I mean, you can sit here and think of how many times in our life that we've compared ourselves to others, and that has stolen the joy of what we are doing right now or what we are meant to enjoy. God's like, in this season of life, I have you doing this particular thing. Is it glamorous? Probably not. Is it getting a lot of recognition? Probably not. But I need you in this season. And when we compare it, we allow it to look at what we're doing and go, well, there's nothing there that's doing any good. And God says, but if only you knew the good that it does. We often compare our seasons of life that we're in, and we fail to see the good in it. We are the ones that fail to see the good in it. God has good in it. He's placed good in it. He's allowing good things to happen, but we don't see the glamour. So what happens? We begin to feel less than. However, I'm going to tell you this, your value is set by a kind and gracious and good God. And no one can diminish your value or add to it, because God is the one who made it. He knows all the unique gifts and talents that he has woven us with, and he knows how they can and will play out into the seasons of our life if we just allow it. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. So I'm going to read that one again. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose, to his purpose. Our purpose is his purpose. He put talents and gifts in us to play out a purpose that he needs us to play out. Purposes, however you want to say it. I'm also going to read to you the Message translation, just because I love how the Message can break it down into a different way to look at the Bible verse. So this one actually is Romans 26-28, the way it kind of meshed together. Meanwhile, the moment we get tired in the waiting, God's Spirit is right alongside, helping us along. If we don't know how or what to pray, it doesn't matter. He does our praying in and for us, making prayer out of our wordless sighs, our aching groans. He knows us far better than we know ourselves, knows our pregnant condition, and keeps us present before God. That's why we can be so sure that every detail in our lives of love for God is worked into something good. Every detail in our lives is worked into something good. He knows. He knows the heartache we may feel. He knows the sighs like, oh, my life, I just feel like it's pointless. Or I just feel like there's no purpose to it. I'm just kind of trudging along. Like, how much of a good am I doing if I'm just helping people sort out their computer problems, or I'm driving my parent back and forth to doctor's appointments, or I'm speaking life into a friend who just right now is through a hard season. But what's the purpose of that? I mean, anybody could do that, right? I could hire someone to drive my parent back and forth to the doctor's appointments. My friend could find another friend to speak life into them. If I quit my job right now, they'll find somebody else to help, sort out all the, technical problems. Right. And that's true, but it's not you. It is not you sitting in the seat driving your parent back and forth. It is not you on the phone listening to your friend, speaking life into them. It is not you at the job who is breaking down the technical parts and helping their days run smoother, but also giving them a side of encouragement and doing it in such a way that they learn from you, that they feel encouraged to come to you and ask more questions. Or maybe they just see a spark of life in you that they're curious about. You never know. God has so many multiple purposes for our lives. And sometimes one of those purposes will shine more than others. And he's going to have it play out in such a way that we just don't see the glamour in it. We just see like a bunch of, okay, here we go again. And he's like, but it's not here we go again. Because he's telling you out there, those of you listening, what you didn't see yesterday when you were kind to the one person who you never know, maybe feels like nobody's kind to them. Maybe you looked them in the eye and you saw them for who they really are. Maybe you took time to explain something that it was one more frustration for them. It was one more thing that they're just like, I'm just not getting this. I'm failing at my job. And then you came along, you explained it in such a way, and you were so kind about it because God has woven you with such good talents and gifts that allowed them to feel value. And you just didn't know it. You just thought you were answering another question. My goodness, isn't that how God works? All the mysterious ways. We say God's mysterious. He works in mysterious ways. Yeah, absolutely. And what if he works in mysterious ways in your life that maybe you'll never really see come to fruition, but they will come to fruition in that person's life? So there you are. There's your purposes. There's your purpose. And that's what I want you to latch on today. If you turn off this episode and the last thing you remember is like, well, maybe I'm serving purposes I will never actually see play through. But I'll tell you this, the amazing thing about God is you might not see it right now, but it will, it can. And I've seen it happen to people I know and love that they thought they were just having a conversation with somebody. And 25 years later, that person comes to them and says, you changed my life that day by listening to me. You saw me that day. And I was not in a good place in my life. And what you said and did shifted things in such a way that here I am today to come talk to you. Guys, you never know. Your purpose, the season of life you're in, like I said before, it may not be sparkly and glittery and glamorous, but yet it may also be serving such deep purposes that go beyond our understanding, because that's God, right? Because ... because God. So I'm going to tell you, and this came to me, like I said, I've been working through a season of this in my life, and we find ourselves like, I know I'm doing this, I know all this, but we can find ourselves back in that questioning of, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated, and comparing ourselves and all that. And then if you do, it's okay. That's okay. But what I want you to do, and the way to break yourself of this cycle is I want you to lean into God, to pray into Him, to find the peace that, you know what? He's going to reveal to you, like right now, what if this is the season I need you in to kind of sit back a little bit and you are serving purposes, you just don't see it. And just to know you're doing what I need you to do. I have clients that come to me because the season of life that they're in, God's asking them to stay put. And it can be a struggle. Like I just said, I know from my own personal experience, it can be a struggle to believe that our purpose can be used in so many ways when we're not out there seeking maybe a new job title or a raise or creating a new company or maybe in charge of what many people are doing and being the one, the task manager to kind of help people out. I mean, we just don't see it. Our human side wants the proof. But in God's eyes, every single day, friends, those of you listening, turn it up, listen to this. Those of you, if you're listening you're on a walk or whatever, and you're listening through your phone, turn it up, because I want you to know, in God's eyes, the everyday, the seasons that are slower, the seasons that don't have as much glitz and glamour to them, have just as much value as the ones that do. Our value and purpose does not rely on worldly recognition. Friends, your value, your purpose does not rely on worldly recognition. God gave that purpose. God gave you the value. He gave you the gifts. That is where it comes from, and that is what it goes back to. Coaching helped me find the value right where I was. I grew up in a Christian household. I grew up going to church. I knew that God did all these things, but I needed a guide to show me of the value right where I was. That person is what they did is they served one of God's purposes to show me like, hey, your value is right where you are in the season you're in. I had to discover that, and I had to learn how to appreciate it. And I began to appreciate it. I needed that season. I became obedient to what God needed me to do. And I was okay with sitting in the season that I was in. It took some time, it took some work, but then I found peace with it, and I found happiness. I found that God needed me right where I was. And through that season, I'll tell you this is how God works too. Through that season is when I discovered the calling that God needed me to pursue. I was comfortable in the season I was in. I found it. I found the peace with it. I struggled with it, but then I found the peace, and I sat in that, and then God revealed to me the next thing He needed me to do. And for me, it became a calling to become a Christian life coach for women and to be a one-on-one coach as well as a group coach. Never in my life thought that is what I would do or even have a podcast. Yet here I sit and here you listen to it. But I'm telling you, through the peace and trying the understanding of finding the season I'm in is right where He needed me, allowed me to move on to the next one. And it's going to look different for everyone. It doesn't mean like, oh, okay, I'm just going to sit in this season because then God's going to make this huge glamorous thing happen for me. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to let you know is when we sit in that season of rest and sometimes the slower season, the not so glamorous season, then God's like, okay, because I have something else coming for you. And I need you right where you're at, around all the people, right where you're at. Just please trust that I've got you, and your value will not change. You will not become more valuable because I put something in your lap that's big and glamorous and glitzy. And He might one day, but it doesn't mean your value has changed. He's just saying, okay, this is another one of your purposes, and I've given you talents to pursue this. So that season of me sitting back and really finding the peace of sitting where I was and being okay with where I was and having my life coach show me the tools and the processes to find that allowed me to discover the next season. And it's going to look different for you. Now, if you find yourself spinning your wheels and feeling hopeless or less than, and you're like, I want to find the peace of where I'm at. Maybe you're like, I'm not ready to pursue something big or glamorous or glitzy, or right now, I want to find happiness where I'm at. Or maybe you do. Maybe you're like, oh, I'm tired of the striving. I need to be okay with where I'm at, but I don't know how. I want you to join me and the other women in Unleashed, because that is why I created it. That is what we do in there. It isn't always about chasing these big dreams or these big goals. Unleashed is about seeing our God-given value and our talents play out right where we are. In the season that we're in, how do those play out? And when you can make peace with that, those values, I mean, those talents, all those things and the purposes will play out and in a much bigger level than you probably could even realize. So, friends, remember this. Your value is not given to you by man, it is given to you by God. And God wants you to see that nothing can diminish that or add to it because he's the one that created it. So thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. Join me for Unleashed. We start this week. You can, if you're like, oh my goodness, this week's not good for me, but I can join in next week. Join in next week. You can join in anytime. You can go to the link in my bio on Instagram or Facebook and find out more about it. And then if you're ready, hit, hey, the button to reserve your spot and you get yourself in there. It's good. It's really good. I'm excited about it. This is something that I've been wanting to do. And through my season of sitting back and accepting where I was and being okay and finding peace and seeing that God's going to play out multiple purposes right where I am, allowed me to step into this. So join us. It's going to be good. And thanks for tuning in, guys.